Ladies and gentlemen, the trade period is now officially doing its mad thing, and it feels like we are well and truly in the midst of this mess that we were hoping to be a part of only just yesterday. It's time to talk all things black and white. Okay, well, haven't things changed in the last few hours or so, with firstly the news breaking out that clubs have access to 26 and 27 first round picks alongside the Pies who are involved in that. Now, we must make the point, which I failed to bring to everyone's attention, is these future firsts, now that everyone has access to, probably doesn't carry the same weight that it did going into the trade period, as the clubs were made aware to this 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, we were only made aware to this today. So what is the next big breaking story that should perk the ears of the Collingwood Football Club? And that is Lealia and how the Saints have walked away from the deal despite Leek turning away a massive deal at the GWS Giants. Let's read. The Bulldogs have been... Okay, so hold on. Let's get to the context. Breaking. Saints out of the running for Lealia. Cal Toomey is reporting that St Kilda has retracted their interest in GWS defender Lealia, who had requested a trade to the St Kilda Football Club. Lealia seemed set to join the Saints, with the trade to be worked out between the two sides before the deadline. Now the Saints have backflipped despite committing to him and targeting him all season. I'm not going to get into so much of the mess of why St Kilda have pulled out. All I know is Collingwood should have a likening to hearing this kind of news in what's been a bleak trade period thus far. It's a backflip, says Liam Pickering. Would they have some buyer's remorse? He requested a trade to St Kilda. You don't do that unless you got a commitment from them. They had plenty of cash. Maybe they now don't have their cash. Does it open the door for clubs like the Dogs, which is what Pickering suggests? But you want to throw in Geelong, who might be a part of that. Collingwood, who missed out on Jack Silvani. We know how that went, and we obviously weren't willing to bend over backwards to offer him the right contract. But you'd think, Geelong, North Melbourne, these types of clubs, even Carlton, I think everyone's going to put their hand in this one for sure. But what else is worth noting here? Before we get into the whole Lealia thing. So, all right, that's the crux of it, right? This is massive for Collingwood. Now, does this mean Collingwood go all out for Lealia? I don't necessarily think that's the case, because we've seen we weren't desperate on Stephen May. We certainly weren't desperate enough to offer a big enough contract to lure Jack Silvani to the Pies. So within reason, it feels like that's how we've gone about the last couple of weeks with all the list management discussions that involve players coming in and players going out, right? So there's that. Lealia is 6'3", 6'4". I'll get that right, because I know some of you will hold me for ransom if I don't get this right. He's had a really consistent year at first team level in the AFL, 194 centimeters. So whatever that makes you, definitely makes you key defender size to a certain extent. He's 24 years old, will be 25 next year. So in that perfect bracket where we would like to swoop in on someone who's ready to play and can still be on a list for 8 to 10 years, depending on their form, right? And this is someone whose name was linked to us before we heard the murmurs around St Kilda getting first dibs at someone like Lealia, way back when, quite early in the season, if I'm not mistaken. So, what does a Lealia bring? All right, so youth, more than depth. I think this guy, so 6'3", 6'4", wherever he stands, 194 centimeters, will have him right in the running to occupy a key position. And you're looking at the position of Jeremy Howe, who has extended his contract by a year with the assumption that maybe we weren't going to bring in certain players, but at the very least, it's good competition. If Lealia comes to the club, it is my view that it's his spot. Is it his spot to lose, or is his spot to earn going into preseason? That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both. I think Howe is gettable. Does that open up a position change for Howe? We know Jeremy Howe is not going to play 24 games. He didn't reach that mark this season. Those groins are quite susceptible to relapse, it seems. he's right there with players like Braden Maynard in the sense he can probably play that position, small, tall. So I'm thinking I can play a wealth of different positions in the back line, but his best position would be to play that intercepting role. So you'd still like to think a Billy Frampton stays in the side and a Darcy Moore stays in the side. So regardless who it was going to be or who it might be, whether it be Stephen May, Jack Silvani, potentially Lealia, all these players present a good problem for our back line, and that's who makes way. Does that mean Harry Perryman gets a role in the midfield on the wing? Quaynor, albeit both of them who have just mentioned, both polled top 5 in the Copeland Trophy. There's definitely room for those players to move if you bring in a Leek, a Leah. Isaac Quaynor, when he was desperately out of form in 2024, played on a wing in the final games of the season. What does it mean for Dan Houston? If that move is to be triggered, does it bring him back into the half-back line, which is what we all assume is going to happen either way, but to bring someone in like Lealia, does that help? Man, this has really got me excited because there was really nothing happening. I suppose this is just the thing we needed to hear. And look, it may not get to the point where he's wearing the black and white, but at the very least, Collingwood will be diligent and have a look and ask the question. But the most important question is, what is he worth amongst all of this consideration? Are we willing? Okay, 25 years old, 6'4". GWS could almost make the case that he's worth a first-round pick. Now, we mentioned how these first-round draft picks in the futures now are a little bit inflated and lose their value because everyone has access to it and because of the Tassie draft. So are we willing to give a first-round draft pick from 26 or 27 for a player like Lealia? I don't know where I stand with that. I'm 50-50. I haven't watched enough Lealia to be able to confidently say, yes, we've got it. We've got to go all in on this guy. And if he's worth a first-round draft pick, then so be it. But it's definitely something worth. He's worth his weight in gold. But I just don't know what that value of gold is equal to in draft pick value, right? So that's something Shane O'Brien, Leper, Fly, they can all confer about and make that decision. And at the end of the day, it's a judgment call, isn't it? If he's a first-round draft pick and we win a flag in the next couple of years, or if he provides stability, you go, of course it was worth it. But he might have a Dan Houston initial season. He might have a Lockie Schultz initial season. But look how Lockie Schultz has gone. The story is to be continued for Dan Houston. And Lealia could be one of those, be a prime example of what's happened in recent years with new talent. But on the other hand, you look at Perryman, who was a success, a raging success. Membry overperformed relative to what we got him for, being a delisted free agent. And I failed to mention Reef McInnes would be watching this whole situation very closely. I know he's still recovering from an ACL and has a grace period. His contract won't be up until the end of 2027. But it's extra competition. It's very healthy, incredibly healthy competition. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. I'm hoping it ends up in a Lealia wearing the black and white. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Should we go for him or should we pass? And as always, ladies and gentlemen, go Pies.